Hello everyone, good evening. So now we are live. Ma'am, just give me 2 minutes, then we will start our session.
Sure, sure. Great.
So, ma'am, will you please turn on your camera?
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I was sharing the YouTube link because many people will join our YouTube session as well. That's why. Uh, yeah. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second public lecture organized by Cultural Studies Research Forum. And you know, I am Koel Banerjee, and on behalf of CSRF, I am thrilled to welcome you all to tonight's special event. And we are in for a truly magical evening with our esteemed guest, Miss Amalu Sazi. Thank you for accepting our invitation, ma'am. CSRF, launched in 1st January 2022, is a student-driven non-profit dedicated to fostering free public lectures and discussion on various research aspects in cultural studies. We aim to empower students by exposing them to new research areas, literary trends, and the latest theoretical concept. From poetry and dance to music and food, CSRF always offers a vibrant platform for exploration, critical thinking, and creative expression. We also host engaging talks like today's talk that spark lively discussion and broaden our understanding of diverse culture and practices. Now, turning into tonight, that we are honored to have Miss Amalu Sazi ma'am grace us with her expertise on the topic of revisiting paradigm, art, historiography, public discourse, and power structures. Miss Sazi, a renowned scholar and writer, holds a Master and MPhil in English literature and is currently pursuing her doctoral research in visual cultural studies at the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. Her research focuses on the art historiography of Kerala, and her diverse accomplishments include her authoring books, namely Utopian Rekhakal, which is a collection of poems, Reading the Tales, a study on Mannan folk tales. Also, she edited few publications like I'm extremely sorry, Kavita Ude Prathisariram and Modernism, configuring literature and society. Her work, 108 Pranayam Manika, is a translation of poems by Mexican poet Elizabeth Carrera As the curator of the column titled After Image in Keralium magazine, Amalu ma'am tries to address socio-political and philosophical facet of the contemporary art. She has illustrated over 7 books and actively contributes to magazine, webzine, and journal. With her profound knowledge and captivating presence, Miss Sazi is sure to offer us a thought provoking and insightful exploration of our chosen theme. Now, the floor is yours, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Goyal Banerjee. It's indeed my pleasure to be here. So now I'll share the screen. Hope the screen is visible to you all. Am I audible to you?
Yes, ma'am. You are audible and the screen is visible perfectly. No problem.
Okay. So today's talk is titled Revisiting Paradigms, Art Historiography, Public Discourse, and Power Structures. So I've structured this lecture in a way that I'll be addressing the idea of historiography, idea of contemporary historiography, and I'll be elaborating it with an example specifically from the context of Kerala. So I'll be focusing on art historiography basically and addressing the visual culture of Kerala and how the public discourse and power structures involved within the cultural sphere of Kerala and how art historiography can engage with this uh, scenario. This is the topic that I would like to offer. So, moving on with the um, lecture, I would like to first, excuse me, yeah, moving on with the lecture, first of all, I would like to introduce the traditional historiography paradigms and perspectives. So, what are the major trends or major paradigms that we had in traditional historiography? Is one of the major focus that I would like to give on a first hand because understanding traditional historiography is very pivotal in understanding how we can deconstruct the very idea of historiography, how to rewrite the history, how to restructure the history, how to engage with historiography as a practice. So, generally, we tend to understand historiography as a chronological account of past events. So, there is a trend to put the past events in a chronological order. These and these events happened in these and these years, or these and these things took place, or these and these are the inventions that happened. These and these are the artworks produced in a chronological manner. So, our traditional idea of historiography was to underline the past events in a very chronological manner or even to idealize the past, like to romanticize about the past. So that was a very traditional notion about historiography or the practice of writing history. So in this context, we understand history as a very linear one with a very clear-cut, paved, well-defined way. It is monolithic and a static one. So, in a traditional notion about historiography, we tend to think that history is a static one, or time, or like the historiographical events are, when it is written down, it is static or it is monolithic, cannot be changed. It is authoritative one. So, history worked as a kind of an authoritative account of past events. So, these are the original things that happened in such a way. So, this indeed resulted in the construction of grand narratives. So, there have been very what would you say? Mm, uh, there is a production of grand narratives in this context of art historiography. So basically, traditional art historiography produced grand narratives within the framework of the predominant power structures during that period. So the production of static epistemological patterns and canons. So traditional art historiography, like now we are talking about historiography in a general way, so that we'll come to art historiography in later. So production of a static epistemological pattern was a concern of traditional historiography. So these are the authority, like these are the original texts that you have to follow, or these are the original events that took place in the past, or these are the uh, undoubtedly correct knowledge system that exists. These are the kind of notions that traditional historiography put forward. So it was a production of a static epistemological pattern, or it also constructed canons. So when it is mentioned in history, we tend to think that these are the artists who are the quote unquote artists, or these are the inventors. These are the what would you say, social reformers. So when it is written in when it is written in the mainstream historiography in a traditional historiographic manner, we tend to think that this is the only reality that exists. But however, it was shaped and operated by power structures. So traditional historiography in a way was owned, operated by the existing power structures in a society. So while writing art history, or while writing history for that matter, what are the parameters that you considered? The parameters are already been set by the society. The parameters are already been set by the dominant section of the society. So in traditional historiography, when you approach history, when you approach past, we have a past which is the original past. The original is being determined, or being like predetermined by the power structures. So when you have a dominant society, and when you have a dominant community in a society, their history becomes the original history of the society. So there will be many marginalized places, or many marginalized areas for that matter. So traditional historiography uh, brought forth many problems in that matter. So uh, now, when it comes to the postmodern era, we came to understand that there are certain issues with understanding history as just a chronological account of past events, or as a very linear account of events, or like understanding past as a monolithic entity, or very static entity for that matter, or construction. This is not just a matter of grand narratives. There are many stories that are left untold. There are many things that are being left unaddressed. There are many mm, things that are left unwritten. So the production of a static epistemological pattern was a very problematic one, because when you have a static epistemological pattern, the static nature is determined by the power position in the society. It is not something that is very uh, what would you say, mm, it's not very dynamic in nature. So when you say that this is the particular knowledge system, then there are many other knowledge systems around which are not getting enough of attention, or enough of like discussion or debate. So that means the production of a static epistemological pattern, or if we are determining a canon, that means there is a power system operating with it. So um, uh, in concise, it was all shaped and operated by power structures. So this is a quote by Michel Foucault from the book The Archaeology of Knowledge. The history of thought of knowledge, of philosophy, of literature seems to be seeking and discovering more and more discontinuities, whereas history itself appears to be abandoning the eruption of events in favor of stable structures. So, actually, history or past isn't a monolithic entity. It consists of various discontinuities, or there are disruption of events, or like there are things that question the stable structures. So we tend to seek um, a very stable structure of knowledge, or of a history of thought, or history of language, history of philosophy, while actually we have many forms of knowledge, many forms of history, many forms of philosophy, many forms of literature. But when we seek to address, or when we seek to address it as a stable structure, we tend to ignore the fact that history itself is problematic. History itself is of discontinuities, or even diversities. So, the understanding that history is heterogeneous becomes pivotal in this aspect. So, contemporary historiography, when it comes to the paradigms and perspectives of contemporary historiography, we tend to understand it in a very new color. We give it a very new color for that matter. So, we have a non-linear, dynamic one, understanding history as a non-linear one, a dynamic one which can be changed, which can be questioned, which can be problematized. And the contemporary historiography started problematizing what would you call grand narratives. So we always had grand narratives. Like we had a very mainstream history that are being taught in schools, in colleges. Why the postmodern understanding of history problematized the grand narratives, the off taught, or like often discussed forms of historiographic patterns. And now the contemporary historiography started focusing or addressing the vernacular. So we have, like, say, for example, the case of India, we have many vernacular cultures, many regional cultures, uh, very multifaceted uh, practices or knowledge systems, philosophy, literature, art. So, contemporary historiography seeks to understand or address the vernacular mm, paradigms of knowledge system or epistemological patterns. And it essentially questioned the power structures. So once you problematize the grand narratives, once you start addressing the vernacular, once you start addressing the non-linearity of the past or non-linearity of history, we start questioning the power structures, obviously. So we started revisiting the ideas of gender, caste, class, and identity. However, this happens with the help of questioning the power structures. When you start questioning the existing systems of knowledge, we it helps to revisit the ideas of gender, caste, class, and identity. Now we understand history as a multiple rather than history as a monolithic entity. Now we have history as a multiplicity of events, and history as an intertextual discourse. So history is not a very homogeneous one, rather it is an intertextual discourse, and history is a multiplicity. So to mark the constantly changing is like coming to the next slide, we have art historiography, contemporary engagements. So, how did art historiography in the contemporary scenario address these issues of power structures, or how did it question the grand narratives? How did it question the uh, canons? How did it question the entire system of uh, stable structures? Um, so That is a very major question that we have to address. In the case of art historiography, the contemporary art historiographical engagements try to mark constantly changing aesthetic sensibilities. We in a traditional notion we used to think that these and these are the beautiful or the enjoyable. These are the aesthetic. So aesthetic sensibilities are never constant. They are never stagnant. They changes over time. It is under a constant flux. So one of the major challenges that contemporary art historiography deals with is to mark the constantly changing aesthetic sensibilities. Secondly, to identify and address the socio-political, historical, and cultural aspects that contribute to the shift in aesthetic parameters. So, if we have a very constantly changing aesthetic sensibilities, what does that mean? It means that there are certain factors or parameters or aspects that contributes to its change, right? So there is a very constantly changing aesthetic sensibility in our society. There are certain aspects that contribute to this shift in aesthetic parameters, though they can be socio-political, historical, cultural, or anything. So art historiography tries to understand and address the socio-political, historical, or cultural aspects that contribute to the shift in aesthetic parameters. Excuse me. Another important engagement that contemporary art historiography deals with is to redefine the canons. So, uh, when you think about a famous painter or a famous sculptor or a famous artist, we tend to think in terms of the great ones, right? The quote unquote great. So understanding the canon and redefining or questioning the canon becomes a major engagement of contemporary art historiography. Thus, the practice of writing history or the practice of history or art history becomes an interdisciplinary practice. So, the contemporary art historiography tries to blur the boundaries between various disciplines, and hence we have a very interdisciplinary, multifaceted kind of an approach towards past, towards the past, and towards the history of art in particular. So I think you've been seeing certain images in these slides. Um, so I'll just explain them later, I guess. Okay, these are certain glimpses from contemporary art. This is a work, One and Three Chairs by Joseph Kosuth. And this is a work by artist Marina Abramovich. So here, now I've just added it to give like, a kind of a glimpse about the contemporary art practices as a parallel understanding. So now art historiography in practice. Art historiography in practice, we try to identify there is a need for a change in an approach. So now art history tries to be interdisciplinary in nature, and it calls for an interdisciplinary approach because in order to understand art in context, we need to understand it in an interdisciplinary perspective. So identifying. Excuse me for a moment. Hope the screen is properly visible now.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay, thank you. So, art historiography, when it comes to practice, there is contemporary art historiography calls for a need for an interdisciplinary approach. So we try to identify art practices of a dominant, like we used to identify art practices of a dominant community in the past as the art history, quote unquote, the art history, and contemporary art historiography understood that it has to be problematized. So there is no one or a monolithic art history. So rather, we have art histories. So there is no monolithic art history. Instead, we have art histories. The invisible history of women in a patriarchal art historiography and the unrecorded subaltern aesthetics in Eurocentric or a Brahminical historiographic narratives has to be questioned. So we had a very linear, static historiographic practices in the past, especially when it comes to the historiography of art historiography. We rarely see women artists or their works that are properly addressed. So, in a patriarchal art historiography, we see the invisible history of women. So, there is an essay by Linton Ocklin, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists, which is a very similar essay in this aspect. So we have an interesting picture of a group of people with a mask on. They are called Gorilla Girls. They actually they are a group of artists. It was a feminist artist collective. So they protested against the very patriarchal notions existed in the art world. So you can, if you are interested, you can just go and check out what Gorilla Girls did. They raised along with their art, they raised protest postures as a medium of their protest. So these were a group of feminist artists. So why have there been no great women artists is another. It is a landmark essay by Linda Nochlin. So you can, if you're interested, you can again go through that. So we finally understood in practice, we have to address the stable structures. We have to problematize or deconstruct the stable structures. So coming to the visual culture and public sphere in Kerala. So being a research scholar focusing on the art historiography in Kerala, I would like to take certain examples from the context of Kerala, which are very general in nature. And finally, we'll just have a look at how can we like look at the trends that we had in Kerala through the lens of a contemporary art historiography practice. So, visual culture and public sphere in Kerala. So, in Kerala's traditional art practices, visual culture, now I'm focusing on painting and sculpture, especially. So, we had many forms of visuality, like we had mural paintings, we had sculptures basically made of wood. We had wood carvings for that matter. So we had such like we had many of you might be familiar with the um, mm, art practice, ritualistic art practice of Kalamirtha, which is slightly like similar to Rangoli that you might you are familiar with. So there are ritualistic art forms like Kalamirtha, or we have mural paintings for that matter, which are used, which had a very significant, like, which has become a very significant icon in Kerala's cultural sphere currently, especially in terms of tourism and so on and so forth. Kerala had such a culture, but rather Kerala's cultural domain in a modernist period, it was largely dominated by print culture. So Kerala's cultural sphere was largely a we had a literary culture rather than a visual culture. So literariness overshadowed visuality. Visual sensibility was governed by the parameters of colonial aesthetic parameters, because when it comes to the modern Indian art, for that matter, we had many art practices, like we had paintings that like we had many vernacular painting practices, but when the colonial art schooling or colonial art pedagogy defined the visual idiom in a very different manner. They brought forth a new medium of art, and they introduced realistic style of painting, and that influenced Kerala's art scene in a very prominent way, especially in the case of you might be familiar with the painter Raja Ravivarma, who is a very iconic figure. So uh, in case of Kerala's colonial art pedagogy, the colonial art pedagogy helped redefined Kerala's idea of art, visual sensibility as well. So Ravi Verma became the ideal artist for us. In a way, his popularity was not just confined in the geographical sphere of Kerala, rather, it was there all around India. However, in a post independent scenario, our modernist visual sensibility started changing. So it was shaped by the art pedagogical institutions of Madras, Calcutta, and Baroda. Uh, so, uh, so our artists from Kerala started migrating to various art schools across across the country, and started getting art education from there, or even they started moving abroad, and they brought back a new visual sensibility, but they didn't, like, it was not just a copy of the entire thing that they had uh, studied, but they improvised it with their vernacular culture as well. And during the same period, it was in the 1950s and 60s, we had many painters, many artists moving to various art institutions in Madras or in Calcutta and Baroda, especially Madras. Uh, and later, like in the 70s and 80s, we see an emergence of radical ideologies and avant-garde movement, and it was reflected in the art scene as well. There was an emergence of avant-garde movement in terms of literature as well as art in Kerala. So in 80s, in 70s, like mid 70s and 80s, we had a large number of little magazines for that, for example, not just in Kerala. We see little magazines in various other states, like in various languages, including Marathi and Gujarati and I think Telugu also. The thing is, in Kerala, we had a very strong little magazine movement, and we started um, understanding art in terms of radical art in the backdrop of the radical ideologies and the avant-garde movements as well. So it is in the almost at the same time in 1980s, there is a group which is a very significant group that emerged called Indian Radical Painters and Sculptors Association from MS University of Baroda. It was basically a group of Kerala artists from Kerala, which are who are popularly known as Kerala radicals. So they are also worth mentioning in the visual culture and public sphere of Kerala, because their influence was mostly like reflected through the radical ideologies and avant-garde movement that happened in Kerala. So the exhibition took place in Kerala. Apart from that, some of them, some of the artists from that group engaged with certain little magazines that came out during that period. Illustrations were a popular visual medium that engaged with the public through various magazines, be it little magazines or literary magazines or popular magazines. We had illustrations which were very prominent visual medium. So uh, many of you might have identified the artist who has painted this particular one. It is artist Nambudiri, who was a very famous illustrator. So, in Kerala's public sphere, though we had many painters or many artists, uh, our after Ravi Verma, we couldn't like uh, in the Kerala's popular culture, Kerala did not identify people or artists, mm, painters or sculptors. Rather, we identified illustrators as artists. So that was a major thing because, as I said earlier, Kerala's culture domain was largely influenced by print culture. We were not gallery we were not very familiar with the gallery culture. We never had frequent art shows. Kerala didn't address art in such a way, especially in terms of popular culture. So, if you take our public domain, for example, you might the Keralites are very much familiar with many literary figures, be it M.T. Vasudevan Nair or be it Vaikam Muhammad Bashir or Madhavi Kutti, so on and so forth. But when it comes to a painter, if you ask someone who is your favorite painter, then there is this problem. We might identify there is this Raja Verma, and then we might count our illustrators as painters. Basically, because our literalness overshadowed visuality. But at the same time, we had very eminent painters who worked in Kerala or who moved away from Kerala, did their art education in various parts of India, came back to Kerala, practiced in Kerala, or stayed away from Kerala, but still engaged with Kerala's public sphere. So still we had painters or artists, but it was largely, in effect, it was at the end of the day, it was literalness was overshadowed by visual. Literalness overshadowed visuality. While talking about the gallery culture in Kerala, excuse me for a moment. Talking about the gallery culture in Kerala, we see an emergence of private galleries in the late 1990s and early 2000s as a result of economic liberalization in Kerala. So, gradually, Kerala started to engage or to come in contact with a gallery culture in the late 90s. It might be very surprising that it stayed with such a high literacy or with so much of which produced a lot of artists or literary figures. We never had a gallery culture, but in the 1990s, at the end of 1990s, there is an emergence of private galleries, and Kerala comes in contact with international or national art market. Mm, in short, we can say that it was an impact of a liberal economy on art market in Kerala. So the economic liberalization policies of the government uh, started, what would you say, encouraging private art galleries in Kerala. But while talking about private art galleries in Kerala, it is interesting to note that most of the art galleries or most of such uh, spaces were in a very small geographical area called Fort Kochi. Fort Kochi is a very culturally very interesting place. That matter, Fort Kochi is a sorry. Fort Kochi is a port, like it is a place of tourist significance. It is a place where more than 30 communities live together. So the space is a very diverse or a very multifaceted cultural space, or a very hybrid cultural space, I would call it. So there we see art market, like while talking about art gallery culture itself, like most of the marketplace, if you go to Fort Kochi and see the marketplace, it may not be a conventional, like it may not be a mainstream gallery, but you see plenty of s- uh, shops and markets where they sell these aesthetics and antique, uh, like so-called aesthetic and antique products, or be it a Kolhapuri chapel to an ornament to a home decor or whatever. So, or a handloom dress or anything. So, uh, it is mostly surrounded by the tourist, what would you say, tourist culture there. And it is the same place, it is in this same place that the gallery culture in Kerala also emerged. So, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, we see the emergence of private galleries in Kerala as a result of economic liberalization. So, it can be so that's how Kerala came in contact with international and national art market. So there are many art. These are only a few, I would say. The first private gallery was Chitrakoodam, was set up by C.N. Karnag in 73. It was a private gallery, very personalized gallery, because it showcased only the work of the artist. Later, we have an art institution called Kerala Kalabidham in 78 in Kochi, by a noted Indian artist and critic M.B. Dev. So another one is Darbar Hall in Kochi, which is a very culturally prominent place, and it is an undertaking of Kerala Lalitkala Academy, and there is a permanent gallery for the works of T.K. Padmini, and there is a contemporary art gallery and art space there. So there is a Kashi Art Gallery and Cafe in Kochi, which was set up in 97 by Anup Skaria along with Dor Younger. They were the one who started the gallery. Then there is Gallery OED, Pepper House, Gallery 27, Sajda Shankar Gallery. It's again a personal gallery, and a museum art gallery. There are plenty of other galleries nowadays, but mostly these were centered around Kochi. So it's not very surprising that Kochi was a hub of this artistic endeavors, because Kochi had such a what would you say, such a very fertile soil for art market or mm, art related cultural endeavors. In the case of curated shows and Kerala's public sphere, as I mentioned earlier, Kerala came in contact with the gallery culture in very late in the late 1990s or early 2000s. But at the same time, Kerala had its first large scale biennial, or even one of the largest Biennale in India, Kochi Musris Biennale in 2012. It started in 2012. It happens every once in 2 years. So there, Kerala witnessed large scale art shows, or Kerala's uh, common public started uh, addressing their, or started getting an exposure to a very new kind of an aesthetic endeavors that are happening all around the globe, which can be like at the same time surprising, or at the same time we can critically look into it. So this neo institutionalization familiarized Kerala's art sphere with terms such as curator, connoisseur, or buyer. So we have a very new outlook towards art market now. So um, such a new visual sensibility started emerging with the interaction with the global art trends. So earlier we used to appreciate it's not necessary that people like you can't say that the public or the popular culture started imbibing the new experimental art forms because obviously these are not a very sudden changes. Like if you introduce a new art form today, or for example if you show and or if you host a show with a lot of installations today, you can say that tomorrow this people will start coming to it and people start enjoying it. It's a to imbibe that artistic sensibility to the or to infiltrate that particular aesthetic sensibility to the public takes time. It's a matter of habit as well. Another thing is in a context of art market, determining the value of artwork, there are certain areas which we can critically look into, or we have to be cautious about or critical about. So the first large-scale show, Double Enders, curated by both Krishnamacharya, was it happened in 2005. Later, the Kochi Musris Biennale, an international exhibition of contemporary art held in the city of Kochi, and it started in the year 2012. And another important show that took place was Lokame Taravada in 2021 with 267 Malayali artists. It was a very large scale show which was set in various spots in the city of Alapura. Within Alapura is again just like Kochi. Alapura also has this background of a tourist destination or like tourist background. So again, in a very aesthetic atmosphere of Alapura, the go downs were like restructured and made into gallery spaces, and large halls were made, and around like over 3,000 works were exhibited. So it was a large scale show of Malayali artists from Kerala. So here, this is the image from the venue of Logameta Award, which was an art show that happened in 2021. And you can see a wall painting here. I would like to give a special mention to this particular wall painting because this painting was it was done by a group of artists called Trespassers. They are a group of artists from Kerala who are the alumni of Kaladi Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit. So they did their masters and bachelors in fine arts there. So these artists, what they did a very significant role in street art in Kerala, as well as promoting art camps for children. So they have done many art camps in across Kerala, especially in tribal villages, especially for kids, for children. Another one is they have done a very remarkable work in street art as well. They painted large scale paintings in streets as well. And not just going there and painting, they started engaging and interacting with the local people out there and understanding the essence of the place and painting landscape paintings. So, coming to the art writing in Kerala and the cultural turn. So, these are in general, these are the, what would you say, the major landmarks that happened. Like it's a very vague one, I would say, because it's incomplete. I couldn't mention the whole entire thing altogether. But still, this is a glimpse of what Kerala's visual culture looks like, and how can you reflect this in the art writing in Kerala? So, talking about the cultural turn that happened in 1980s, the cultural turn happened in 1980s started influencing art writing in Kerala by the wake of 21st century. So we started employing interdisciplinary methodology that helped to understand the rhizomatic structure of art history in Kerala. So to use Dilusian term, a term used by Gilles Deleuze, art history in Kerala is very rhizomatic in nature. You see multiple histories. You see heterogeneous practices. Um, you see connections between various cultural artifacts in art history, and you see it can be identified as a rhizomatic structure. So the rhizomatic structure in art history has to be understood or analyzed in terms of its multiplicity or in terms of its heterogeneity. So there is a need for an interdisciplinary methodology. So we see the blurring of disciplinary boundaries and problematizing high conventional historiographic practices in here. So we try to identify art writing in Kerala, or art history in Kerala in terms of various disciplinary terrains, so that we can draw various concepts and methods from various disciplinary terrains to address or to identify uh, this complex cultural uh, facet of artist like visual culture in Kerala. So this is the I think uh, this is the overall thing that I was trying to put forward. So thank you, and I would like I think now we'll have an interaction.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was really amazing. And hello, everyone. If you have any queries related to today's topic, you can directly ask to ma'am, or you can share your feedback about today's session with our respected guest. And on YouTube, whoever is listening us, please post their queries on YouTube chat box. I will forward it to ma'am. Ma'am, after listening your lecture on this, I can say that art history traditionally shaped by dominant narratives often excluded marginalized voices. So my question is, how can we include these marginalized voices into this? Into revisiting this paradigm in gallery culture and art culture.
First of all, what we can understand is like uh, there is you can say that there is a single history. So identifying various aspects of history, we have to understand what is the power structure that is being operated in the society. By critiquing the power structures that are being operated in the society, we'll be able to trace the marginalized voices. We'll be able to trace the vernacular culture or vernacular practices. So basically, in order to understand the marginalized voices, you have to critique or you have to engage with the power structure operating in the society. Identifying and engaging or identifying and criticizing or dissecting the power system is the key, I would say. And that too, we can't use a very monolithic kind of a
Thank you,
methodology. We
ma'am.
want to understand art history in terms of its own multiplicity, we have to understand it in terms of what would you say? We have to employ a methodology which is equipped enough to um, what would you say, to deal with the multiplicity of its multiplicity. So that's why I would like to propose an interdisciplinary methodology to understand art history.
It was really helpful for me and for others as well. And one more question, that what strategies can be used to foster meaningful dialogue and critical engagement with art among the public? It is a question we received from YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
In my opinion, one could be revisiting our pedagogy, like our school, even our school academic system onwards. We have to include, or we have to give a certain kind of importance to our visual culture, just like literary culture. We've been learning poetry or fiction or drama for ages, but we never thought of understanding art or something like that in a way, in an equal importance, right? So another thing is fostering communities, like discussions, or uh, we can form communes and start discussions, um, or like bring up more gallery spaces, encourage more public funded programs for that matter. So, but thing is, this will be a very slow process, and it will be very gradual process. And because if something is not there in the society, you can't just put it in a very mechanical way. It has to come up with very slow, gradual inputs that we give. So the strategies, I would say, gradually, uh, in, adapting something which is related to our pedagogy, or even our public popular culture, our popular magazines, through popular magazines or such way.
Yeah, I hope she got her answer. And thank you so much. If anyone wants to pick, otherwise, we shall go for the vote of thanks, ma'am. I hope you enjoyed today's session with us, ma'am. We are really
Sure,
happy to
sure.
have
It
you.
was a it was a
Ritika, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please turn on your camera if you can. Hi, Ritika.
Good evening,
So, yeah.
ma'am.
So please go ahead with your respected vote of thanks. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest speaker, Ms. Amalu Shaji, for her insightful discourse on revisiting paradigms, art historiography, public discourse, and power structures. Her profound exploration of these complex themes has opened new avenues of understanding and provoked throughout reflection among all. Through her erudition and eloquence, Miss Shaji has illuminated the intricate interplay between art, history, and societal power dynamics, enriching our intellectual discourse immeasurably. Next, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to Dr. Kalyani Vallath, whose visionary leadership and dedication have been the driving force behind the success of Vallath and our journey of exploration. Dr. Vallath's commitment to excellence and tireless efforts to promote knowledge sharing serves as a beacon of inspiration to us all. Special thanks to the dedicated CSRF team, whose meticulous planning, coordination, and execution have ensured the seamless organization of today's lecture. Lastly, a warm thank you to every participant for the insightful contribution throughout the event. Your presence has been instrumental in fostering a vibrant atmosphere of learning and collaboration. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritika. Thank you, ma'am. So with your permission, ma'am, I am ending today's session. Thank you all.
Thank you.